So, good morning, dear students. Today we'll be discussing about the digestion and absorption chapter. So, very interesting chapter it is. It is in so the human physiology. We have interesting topics under them. So, the first chapter is digestion and absorption. So, the backdrop of the slide, you can see the esophagus leading into the stomach leading into the small intestine, which is nearly 7 meters in length, and this finally opens into the uh, large intestine at the cecum. Cecum has a small vermiform appendix, okay, and they have an ascending colon, so transverse colon and descending colon, and finally it leads into the uh, rectum. So rectum opens out through the anus. So this is the major part of the digestive system. So the alimentary canal and accessory glands are associated with it, like pancreas, the liver, salivary glands, then intestinal juice. So intestine itself secretes secretions, which we call it as intestinal juice. So these are the other accessory glands which are involved in the process of digestion. So here at the backdrop, you have the different types of fruits, different types of food, like they are source of carbohydrates, proteins. They are also source of fats or lipids. Then they are also source of vitamins, vital amino acids, mineral salts, water, especially watermelon. You know that more than 90% of it is made up of water. Okay, then they are also source of fibers. So the food is the source of energy, and that food we uh, eat, and that will gets digested in our digestive system, and they are absorbed in the simple form in the bloodstream. So the absorption process, it takes place in the small intestine as well as large intestine. So they are absorbed as simple food molecules. They are absorbed into the bloodstream as glucose, amino acids, fatty acids. So they are absorbed in simplest form. And this food is supplied to each and every part of our body. Each and every part of the cell of our body also obtains this food. So that food within the cell, each cell, they undergo the cellular oxidation. That is in the cytoplasm of the cell, they undergo glycolysis, and in mitochondria, they undergo the breakdown of this food molecules to release uh, energy in the form of ATP. That is how we are utilizing energy in the form of ATP. And you should also remember, whenever we are very sick, so we do get the drips, isn't it? So that drips itself, if you look into it, it will be having either glucose, or they also call it as exose or dextrose. So that is what directly the simplest form of food is supplied to the bloodstream, so that immediately the patient can be energized. Okay, so remember about this digestion and absorption. So let us begin with the details of this part of the chapter. So I'll be putting in the full screen. Uh, okay. So food and nutrition. What is nutrition? Nutrition is the getting and utilization of energy rich nutrients by an organism. So nutrition is the obtaining energy rich food by an organism. So it is the getting and utilization of energy rich nutrients, so which is within the food by an organism. So that we call it as nutrition. So they should obtain energy rich nutrients. So not only obtaining it, but also utilizing the energy rich nutrients. So we call, by an organism, we call it as nutrition. So food provides energy for life activities. They also provide materials for growth. So food provides for us energy for life activities, the materials required for our growth, and also it food helps in maintaining body temperature. So the maintenance of body temperature is also one of the activity of the food. So food also helps in the repair of dead and worn out tissues. So the food also helps in the repair of tissues. So these are all the different functions of the food. So I have already told you the food nutrients, 7 essential nutrients are required. So carbohydrates, nearly 60% of them are required. Proteins is 15%, fats is 15%, vital amino acids, different vitamins are required by our body. That is, vitamins are nothing but vital amino acids, then minerals, water, and fibers. Okay, all these are the essential nutrients that we require in each and every day's diet. Okay, so these are all the different sources of food that provides us with the required nutrients. Okay, so the proper intake of these foods. So from, if you're vegetarian, the vegetarian sources of food are there where you get all these nutrients, or non-vegetarian, you get uh, plenty of these proteins, fats, and lipids, the vitamins from the meat source as well as the egg source. So there is either of these food sources we get these essential nutrients. So the water plays an important role. So you cannot ignore water, isn't it? So the carbohydrate, then proteins. This is the major proteins part of it. Then the fat part of it. Cholesterol is more in the yolk of the egg than even in uh, the butter fruits. So you get good source of fats. Then there is the meat source is also there from which you obtain fats. So the vitamins you obtain from these different foods. Okay, almost all the food has some amount of vitamins or other things. Then minerals, the water. So water is plays an important role in the various metabolic processes and prevents the dehydration of the body. So we have to consume proper amount of water to help our body overcome the dehydration. So, and there should also be, for the metabolic processes, water is an important aspect of our metabolic process. So we should consume uh, good amount of water every day, at least 2 liters of water every day. Okay, many of us are there who do not consume much of water. So it's better that we consume at least 2 liters of water for a healthy metabolic process and to prevent the dehydration of our body. So the consumption of water might vary as per your body weight also. So the digestive system is divided into two major parts. That is the alimentary canal, or we also call it as gut. Okay. So then the digestive glands, which are the or the associated glands. So the alimentary canal, it commences from the mouth. Mouth leads into the buccal cavity or the oral cavity, and it leads into pharynx, which is a common opening between the windpipe and the food pipe. That is the esophagus. So the pharynx is guarded, the glottis of it is guarded by the epiglottis, a cartilaginous flap, so which closes the glottis whenever we swallow the food. I told you that sometimes when we are swallowing the food, the rate of swallowing is faster than the rate of closing of our epiglottis, and food enters into our windpipe. Still, we cough it out. We feel the uneasiness that is caused because of the entry of food particle into the nasal tract. Okay, so every one of us would have experienced it at one or the other point of our life. So just remember about the pharynx, which is a common opening between the food pipe and the windpipe. So the glottis is closed by the epiglottis, which is a cartilaginous flap, and this epiglottis prevents the entry of food into the larynx or the voice box and the windpipe, that is the trachea. So the food pipe from the pharynx, the food pipe continues into esophagus. Esophagus leads into the stomach, and stomach leads into the small intestine, which is nearly 7 meters in length. And then finally, it opens up from small intestine, it leads to large intestine. So you have an ascending colon, transverse colon, descending colon, and finally there is a rectum, and it opens out through the anus. So through the anus, the undigested food is thrown out of our body. So this is the alimentary canal or the gut part of it. So the digestive glands or associated glands are salivary glands are there. So I told you to remember PSS. not RSS, PSS. So a pair of parotid gland, a pair of submaxillary glands, a pair of uh, lingual glands. So, a pair of parotid glands, a pair of submaxillary glands, a pair of sublingual glands. So that is the salivary glands. They secrete saliva. So in the mouth, I told you that mechanical digestion takes place and partial chemical digestion is brought about by the salivary amylase. Salivary amylase is also called as talin. Okay, not Stalin, Talin, Ptylin. So Talin. So then the other glands are the gastric glands present within the stomach. So the liver secretes the bile juice, so which is conveyed through the gallbladder is a reservoir of this bile juice. From the gallbladder, it opens into the duodenum of the intestine through the bile duct. Okay, and the pancreas, they are the leaf-like structure. They are a heterocrine gland because they are both exocrine and endocrine. Exocrine function is they secrete hormones. Endocrine function is they secrete hormones like insulin and glucagon. Especially in pancreas, there are cells called as islets of Langerhans, which have alpha and beta cells. Beta cells secrete insulin, alpha cells secrete the glucagon hormone. So that is the endocrine function. And the pancreas, they are also going to secrete the pancreatic juice, which is conveyed through the pancreatic duct and they open into the duodenum. So the pancreatic juice contains the enzymes. So the pancreatic uh, juice is the exocrine part of it, which is conducted through the ducts and they open into the duodenum. So the intestine has intestinal glands which secretes the intestinal juice, or we also call it as succus entericus. They also have enzymes, and as I have already told you, the maximum digestion takes place in the duodenum of the small intestine. So more than the stomach, the maximum digestion takes place in the duodenum of the small intestine. So let us understand the digestive system, which is majorly made up of alimentary canal or gut and the associated digestive glands. Now let us study the first part of the alimentary canal, that is the mouth and buccal cavity. So the mouth is a region to receive the food. So it is guarded by the upper lip and lower lip. Okay, so the gums we call it as gingiva. Okay, the upper lip and lower lip we have. So the buccal cavity is also called as oral cavity or mouth cavity. So it consists of a palate. Okay, the roof of the mouth we call it as palate. So it is a hard palate. So the teeth and a muscular tongue. So I told you, mule illada nalige. So the consists of the buccal cavity consists of a hard palate. So it consists of a hard palate, which we also call it as roof. Then it also consists of teeth and muscular tongue. So they also consist of muscular tongue. So the palate has anterior, this anterior portion is hard palate and posterior portion is the soft palate. So there is a tongue is a muscular organ attached to the floor of oral cavity. So tongue is a muscular organ attached to the floor of the oral cavity by the frenulum. So it is attached to the floor of the oral cavity by the frenulum. Tongue has small projections on it called as papillae. Some papillae bear the taste buds. See, we can recognize different type of taste, isn't it? So sweet, uh, saltiness, then the bitterness, sourness, acidic taste. Okay, apart from that we also can taste the it is more than taste, it is irritation that it causes on our tongue, that is the pungency whenever we take chilies. So the pungency or hotness of it, it irritates our tongue. So the pungency is also more than a taste, it is one of the irritation that causes the heat or the hotness of these chilies. Okay, so we have the taste buds in the papillae which recognize different type of taste, as I told you: sweet, sour, uh, salty, bitter, okay, acidic, and also the taste of pungency that can be recognized by the taste buds. At the back, on either side of the tongue, you can see here almost the orangish colored structure at the back. On either side of the tongue, the tonsils are present. Sometimes, if they get infected, we call it as tonsillitis. You might have heard about that, or you might have undergone it also. Okay, at the back, on either side of the tongue, tonsils are present. So we have this teeth. So they have a hard structure called as enamel. They are made up of that, the enamel. So this is the incisor that you can notice. Then there is a the canine teeth. So the incisors, lateral incisors. Then there is the canine teeth. Okay, so we have this molar teeth and premolars and molar teeth, and they have this crown-like thing which we call it as cusp. Okay, so they have this cusp, and the hanging structure from the mouth we call it as the ula. So we call it as ula. So the salivary glands, they have the submandibular ducts. So I've told you that they have three types of glands in salivary glands: a pair of parotid glands, a pair of sublingual glands, a pair of submandibular uh, ducts or glands. So this is about the mouth and buccal cavity. Next, we'll study under this mouth and buccal cavity itself, the nature and mode of arrangement of teeth. It is called as dentition. So, a healthy teeth for a better smile. So, teeth plays an important role in our digestion process. The nature and mode of arrangement of teeth, we call it as dentition. So, the nature and mode of arrangement of teeth, we call it as dentition. So, human dentition consists of heterodont, tecodont, diphyodont. So the human dentition, they consist of heterodont, thecodont, and diphyodont. So they are the three types of dentition that you can notice in human being. So heterodont, hetero as in name indicates, different types of teeth are there. Thecodont, they are placed, teeth are placed within the cavities. Diphyodont, so two set of teeth we have. So that is one, the primary or milk set, or we also call it as deciduous set, secondary or the permanent teeth set. So that is why we call it as diphyodont. Okay. So in human dentition, the heterodont dentition, there are different kinds of teeth are present. So they are incisors. Incisors are for cutting the food. So especially when we are eating the chapati, or so the cutting part of it is done by the incisors. Then canines, the next one is canines, which is denoted by C. It is for tearing the flesh. Most of the time it is the flesh. Even sugarcane tearing, we have to utilize this canines. So canines, majorly they are well developed in case of the carnivorous animals. So the canines in us is not as well developed as in case of carnivorous animals. So we are not completely the carnivore also. So we do have canines, and these canines, they are sharper in nature at the edges. They are meant for tearing the flesh, or for tearing the uh, food. It can be like tearing the sugar cane, okay, removing the uh, outer part of the sugar cane. We use the canines. So it is not just for tearing the flesh, even for removing the hull, the outermost peel of the sugar cane, we use the canines. Then premolars, which is denoted by PM, so they are for mastication. So chewing, we call another name as mastication. So chewing, we also call it as mastication. So the molars and premolars, they are meant for mastication. So we have different kinds of teeth. So we can remember it as ICPM. So I stands for incisors, C stands for canines, P stands for premolars, and M stands for molars. So you can see the nature of the teeth. So the canine, it it is having a sharper edge. Then the incisors, you can notice here, they are directly meant for cutting the food. Then molars, so this is how they look, and premolars. So the molars have the cusps. Okay, so the cusp helps in mastication, chewing of food. So the dentition formula will be talking about later. So the premolars and molars, we are going to collectively call it as cheek teeth because they are present at the cheek region of us. We call it as cheek teeth, and they have cusps, so which are meant for chewing the chewing the food or mastication. Okay, premolars and molars are collectively called as cheek teeth because they are present in the cheek regions and they have cusps. Okay, so that is what you have to remember regarding the premolars and molars, which are also called as collectively called as cheek teeth, and they have cusps. So tecodont dentition, it means that teeth are placed in the jaw socket. So teeth are placed in the jaw socket. So they are all placed in the cavity. Tecodont means so the teeth are all placed in the jaw socket. See, we have two jaws. The jaws has our teeth, isn't it? So the upper jaw is fixed to the skull. Lower jaw is movable. You can move it to the left, right, okay, up and below within the architecture of it. So the teeth are placed in the jaw sockets. So that is the reason we call it as tecodont dentition. So the diphyodont dentition, it means that teeth appear twice in lifetime. So they are milk teeth and permanent teeth. So teeth appears twice in lifetime. They are milk teeth and permanent teeth. So milk teeth is also called as decidual teeth. So they are 20 in number. Okay. They develop at the age of 6 to 7 months of birth, and they are replaced by permanent teeth at the age of 6 to 7 years. Okay, so the milk set or the decidual set, they develop at 6 to 7 months of age, and they are replaced by permanent set of teeth at the age of 6 to 7 years. So we should remember about it. So that is the uh, milk or decidual set of teeth. Okay. Then permanent teeth, they are 32 in number. So they are formed after 6 to 7 years of age, and they are 32 in number. So these are the different, and they remain with us throughout our lifetime. Okay. The last four molars that we are having, they appear only at the age of 18. So the last four molars, they appear only at the age of 18. So we call them as wisdom teeth. Okay, the last four molars, here you can notice one, two, 3 and 4. The last four molars, they arise only at the age of 18 years. So we call it as wisdom teeth. Okay, sometimes I told you that there is a painful process whenever this wisdom teeth is appearing. Some of them, the wisdom comes without much of pain. I am talking about teeth. Okay, so the wisdom teeth comes without much of pain. So even I had the wisdom teeth without much of pain. Okay, the hard chewing surface of teeth, it is made up of enamel. So the hard substance that they have is enamel. See this slide, it represents the permanent set of teeth. This slide, it represents the milk set of teeth, or you also call it as decidual set. Okay, so the hard chewing surface of teeth, it is made up of enamel. They are the strongest material in our body. The enamel, more strong than bones. Enamel is the strongest material in our body. Okay, so the milk or decidual teeth, they are 20 in number. I asked you to remember a formula. ICPM. So incisors, canines, premolars, and molars. And remember the number 2102. In case of the premolars, the milk set 2102. So incisors are 2. In case of premolars, the incisors are 2. So the first two are incisors, okay, canine 1, and premolars is 0, and two of them are the molar teeth. Okay, premolars are not there at all. So that is what you have to remember. This is the upper part of the jaw, the right side of it. We have this. The left side of it. See, from the direction of viewing, it is left side, and from the right side of it, you have again 2102. That is two incisors, one canine, and two molars. There are no premolars. So five here, 2102, 2102. And again in the lower jaw, so from here 2102, 2102. So four sets are there, isn't it? That is why we multiply it with 4, 2102 into 4. Okay, so totally it will be 5 into 4 is 20. Okay, and sometimes in milk set they might ask you, so calculate the number of canines in the upper jaw. Only in upper jaw means then they are having two canines. So incisors are 4. So only in the upper jaw if they are talking about, and molars are 4 in number. But if they are talking about the entire teeth, upper and lower jaw, so the total number of canine teeth in case of milk set of teeth is 1, 2, 3, 4. So there are totally 4 canines. And so you have to multiply it by 4, 2102. So incisors are 2. So total incisors are 2 into 4, that is 8. And canines are 1. 1 into 4 is 4, and premolars are 0 into 4 is 0. So there is no premolars at all in the milk set, and molars they are 2 in number. 2 into 4 is 8. Okay, this is the milk set or the decidual set of teeth, okay, which is arising from uh, 6 to 7 months. It arises in a baby, 6 to 7 months of age, and then it is being replaced by a permanent set of teeth at the age of 6 to 7 years. Okay, so remember about that. In permanent set, you can remember the same thing with a different formula. ICPM, it would be 2123. So where incisors, if you take only the upper jaw, ICPM 2123. So incisors are two, the central incisor and lateral incisor. Then there is IC, so canine is 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. The premolars are 2 in number and the molars are 3 in number. Especially the last set of molar, we call it as wisdom teeth, which appears in the uh, at the age of 18 years. So totally 4 wisdom teeth are there. So this is towards the left side of the upper jaw. So they have 2, 1, 2, 3. The right side also has 2 incisors, 1 canine, 2 molars, and 2 premolars and 3 molars. So even in the right side of the upper jaw, they have the same. So it would be the same in the lower jaw also. The left side and right side, they have the same set of teeth. So totally, so ICPM 2123, that is 8 into 4 is 32 teeth. So we have totally 32 set of teeth in us. Okay, so this is what you have to remember about in case of our dentition formula, in case of the permanent set of teeth. Okay, so if they ask you during examination, calculate the total number of canines in permanent set. So it is going to be 4. So if they have, you have to calculate the total number of incisors. So incisors is 2, 2, 1, 2, 3. Incisor is first one, 2. 2 into 4 is 8 incisors are present in us. So what is the total number of premolars? So premolars is again 2 in number. So 2 into 4. So they are going to be again 8 numbers of premolars. So they have molars which are 3. So 3 into 4 is 12 molars are there. So the premolars and molars are meant for mastication or chewing. So premolars and molar teeth, they are also called as cheek teeth. They have cusp. Okay, so these are all things that we have to remember about. So the uh, last four molars, they are appearing only at the age of 18 years, so we call it as wisdom teeth. Okay, so these are things that we have to remember in case of dentition formula. So there is a anecdote of Aristotle at his time, he made a big mistake when he said that men are having 32 teeth and women have only 30 teeth. And he had two wives. Probably his wives never allowed him to count their teeth. Okay, probably they counted his fingers. Anyway, that is just an anecdote that you can remember about Aristotle uh, making a blunder, saying that women have only 30 teeth and men have 32 teeth. Okay. Anyway, the next part of the slide will go into. So the dental formula is the formula that explains the kind and number of teeth. So what is dental formula? It is a formula that explains the kind and number of teeth. So human dental formula of permanent teeth is incisors 2 bar 2, canines. So 2 bar 2 implies in the one jaw we are talking about, left and right. So incisors, they are having two. Okay, canines 2 and 2, that is left side right side. It is canines is 1 bar 1, so you can remember it as 2 and 3, just put it as again dash 2. Okay, canine 1, premolars 2, 3 molars. So right and left you have 2 and 2, 1 and 1, 2 and 2, 3 and 3. This is the entire set of teeth in one jaw, but that is upper jaw. So lower jaw, if you have to you have to multiply this by twice because we have two jaws, upper and lower jaw. So totally it would be 16 into 2 is 32. Okay, so that is how you find out the total number of teeth that we have, and total number of premolars, molars. I have told you how to calculate it. So then dental formula of milk dentition. So milk set of teeth. Okay, so incisors 2 of 2, 2102, you can remember it as canine is 1, premolar is 0, molar is 2. So the right side of the jaw, they also have 2102. So totally they have 10. 10 into 2. So since we have two jaws, 10 into 2 is 20 teeth. So that is how we calculate the dental formula. The formula that explains the kind and number of teeth, we call it as dental formula. Next, we'll proceed for is the pharynx. The common passage for digestive and respiratory system, we call it as the pharynx. So here you can notice the colors they have given. So pharynx is differentiated into different regions. So nasopharynx, that is the nasal tract. Oropharynx, that is the mouth part of it, the pharynx that they have, we call it as oropharynx. And hypopharynx. Okay, so this is the common opening that we have here. So there's a larynx or voice box you can see here. So they have a common opening, that is the glottis. Then this is the esophagus. The food passes through the esophagus. So at the hypopharynx region, you can notice that the glottis is covered by a flap called as epiglottis, which prevents the entry of food into the trachea. Through the larynx, they prevent the entry of food into the trachea. Whenever we swallow food, the epiglottis closes this uh, trachea or windpipe, and food passes through esophagus. But sometimes before the epiglottis could close its the glottis could be closed by epiglottis. Some food can enter through this trachea, and I told you that it causes a lot of irritation, especially if it is spicy food or pungent food. So still we cough it out. We would be having this uneasiness that you might have experienced once or twice in your lifetime, surely. So these are the things that you have to remember in the pharynx region. It is differentiated into nasopharynx. So you can see the color part of that. So the yellowish part is nothing but the oropharynx. So the oral part of it. Then the hypopharynx, where it's a common opening between the nasal tract and the food pipe. So the glottis is covered by epiglottis. See, the common passage for pharynx is the common passage for digestive and respiratory systems. So when food materials pass through the pharynx, the cartilaginous epiglottis, they close the glottis, that is the opening of larynx, and prevent the entry of food into trachea. So that is the purpose of this epiglottis. So the cartilaginous epiglottis, they close the glottis or the opening of larynx, and they prevent the entry of food into trachea. So that is what they do. So the common passage for digestive and respiratory systems are pharynx. When food materials are passing through the pharynx, the cartilaginous epiglottis, they close the glottis, the opening of larynx, and prevent the entry of food into trachea or windpipe. So this is what is being done. So the epiglottis closes this whenever we swallow the food. So the epiglottis closes the glottis, and the food can pass only through the esophagus. Okay, so the epiglottis closes the uh, windpipe. So they, that is what they are doing it. Okay, so you can see this epiglottis part of it, the sharp pinkish color, which closes this uh, trachea part of it, and food passes only through the esophagus. Now, the esophagus is a muscular tube which is around 30 centimeter in length that conducts food into stomach. So esophagus is a muscular tube which is 30 centimeter in length, and they conduct food into stomach. So whenever you are writing esophagus, O is mandatory. So here some spelling mistakes are there. Please don't look into that. O is mandatory. Even though we pronounce it from E, esophagus, O is silent there. O has to be written. Okay. So the posterior part of the esophagus has the posterior part we are talking about. So the posterior part of the esophagus has this sphincters. So this sphincter present at the posterior part of the esophagus, we call it as gastroesophageal sphincter. So this is made up of a circular muscle. So what does the sphincter do? So the posterior part of the esophagus, we find a sphincter which is called as gastroesophageal sphincter. So it controls the opening of esophagus into stomach. So it controls the opening of esophagus into stomach. So the food that is chewed in the mouth along with saliva, so they undergo partial digestion because of salivary amylase. I told you starch undergoes digestion there. So the food is passing through our esophagus as pellets, and we call that as uh, bolus. So the food which passes from the buccal cavity into the esophagus, we call it as bolus, bolus, bolus. So that food, when it has passed through the esophagus, so esophagus have muscles which brings about this peristaltic movement, that is contraction and relaxation of these muscles help in the movement of food into reaching the stomach. But the esophagus at the posterior part is guarded by this sphincter, which we call it as uh, the gastroesophageal sphincter, and they regulate the opening of esophagus into stomach. So the food finally enters into the stomach. Okay. The next part is the stomach. So we have a J-shaped stomach, which is for the storage and digestion of food. So isn't it J-shaped? Can you look into this J-shaped stomach? So they are meant for, the structure is meant for storage and digestion of food. So it is almost like reservoir of food. So the storage of food, it takes place, and digestion of food. Both are the functions of this J-shaped structure called as stomach. So the esophagus opens into this J-shaped structure called as the stomach. So they have three parts. So you can remember it as FCP. So you can remember these three parts of the stomach as FCP. That is the fundus part of the stomach. Then there is the cardiac part of the stomach. Okay. So the middle is the upper is called as the anterior part or upper part of the stomach. We call it as fundus. The middle, we call it as cardiac stomach. The lower or posterior part of the stomach, we call it as the pyloric stomach. The lower or posterior part of the stomach, we call it as pyloric stomach. So these are the three regions of the stomach. So the upper or anterior part of the stomach, we call it as fundus. The middle, we call it as cardiac stomach. And the lower or the posterior part of stomach, we call it as pyloric stomach, or it is also called as antrum. Another name of this pyloric stomach is antrum. So we also call it as antrum. So the pyloric stomach leads to a small intestine. So they lead into small intestine by an opening called as pylorus. So the opening is called as pyloric opening. So the uh, pyloric stomach leads through small intestine by a small opening called as pylorus. So which is guarded by pyloric sphincter. So they are guarded by the pyloric sphincter. So the sphincters prevents the backflow of food. So the pyloric sphincter is present, uh, which is guarded by the pyloric sphincter. So the inner wall of the stomach bears longitudinal folds. So this we call it as rugae. So the inner wall of the stomach bears the longitudinal folds called as rugae. Okay, they are also responsible for the mechanical digestion even takes place in the stomach. So the rugae brings about mild mechanical digestion, but major mechanical digestion is in the uh, oral cavity or buccal cavity. But rugae also brings about, which is the folds, gastric folds that are found in the inner wall of the stomach base, longitudinal folds called as rugae. Okay. The small intestine is the longest part of gut. So the food that has passed through the stomach, now they would have become acidic. And this acidic food, which passes from the stomach into small intestine, we call it as chyme. So the food that passed from the oral cavity into the esophagus, we called it as bolus. The acidic food which passes from the stomach into the small intestine, we call it as chyme. That is CHYME. And the alkaline food which passes from the small intestine to large intestine, we call it as the chyle, CHYLE. So chyme is the acidic food which passes from the stomach into the small intestine. Chyle, CHYLE, is the alkaline part of food which passes from the small intestine into large intestine. So remember this bolus, chyme, and chyle. So you have to remember these terms. So the longest part of the stomach is the small intestine. It is 7 meter long and they are 2.5 centimeter diameter is there. So the stomach is 7 meter long and they have a diameter of 2.5 centimeter. So the small intestine has three parts: duodenum, jejunum, and ileum. So the small intestine has three parts. Duodenum is the first part of it, which is C-shaped first part. Jejunum is the middle part. Ileum is the terminal part. So 7 meter long, just you assume how much tightly it is packed within our abdomen. Okay, and they are 2.5 centimeter diameter. If you look into the inner folds of this intestine, there'll be a section of intestine, small intestine, if you study the anatomy. So the diameter that they are having, 2.5 centimeter diameter, they have a large number of finger-like infolds are there. So they increase the surface area available for absorption. They also have this finger-like folds, so which we call it as the uh, villi. And this villi in turn will be having this columnar epithelium cells, and that columnar epithelium cells, they also have finger like projections at microscopic level. We call it as microvilli. So villi has columnar epithelium, which has brush border made up of this microvilli. So you should remember, even at the microscopic level, they are meant for absorption of food. So that is why they have this finger-like protrusions to increase the surface area, total surface area that is available for absorption. So that is what you have to understand about the small intestine. It is the longest part of the digestive gut or alimentary canal. They are 7 meter long and they have a 2.5 centimeter diameter. The three parts of small intestine are duodenum, which is the C-shaped first part, and major digestion takes place in duodenum. So DJI, you can remember it as jejunum is the middle part, helium is the terminal part of it. So the small intestine has finger-like villi, which are seen at the mucosa layer. So the small finger-like villi, they have it in the intestine. So when you take a section of the intestine, you can notice this small finger-like villi. So we call this villi, finger-like villi are seen at the mucosa layer. Each villus has a brush border columnar epithelial cells. So they have brush border columnar epithelial cells, which in turn, so this columnar epithelial cells in turn, they have uh, provided with microvilli. So villi has microvilli. So villi consists of a capillary network and a small lymph vessel. So the villi consists of capillary network and a small lymph vessel, that is lacteal, we call it as. So the capillary network are meant for the absorption of the digested food in its simplest component. So that is why the way villi consists of capillary network and a small lymph vessel. So for absorption of food into the bloodstream. Okay, that is about the small intestine. The next part is the large intestine and anus. Okay, the large intestine, it is around 1.5 meter long. Okay, as the name indicates, large intestine, they are larger in size. So they are 1.5 meter long. So large intestine is 1.5 meter long. It has three parts: cecum, colon, and rectum. So the large intestine has three parts: cecum, colon, and rectum. So you can see the cecum, the ascending colon, transverse colon, descending colon, and rectum. So small large intestine has three parts: cecum, colon, and rectum. So it is 1.5 meter long. It has three parts: cecum, colon, and rectum. So the cecum also has a worm-like structure called as vermiform appendix. They are non-functional in human beings, but in herbivorous animals they are functional. So they also are in association with symbiotic bacteria, which secretes cellulase enzymes and brings about the digestion of cellulose component of plants. But in human beings, this is not well developed. So many times, since the vermiform appendix is non-functional, we are not completely herbivore also. Whereas in herbivore animals, they are functional. Okay, but we are not completely carnivore also because we do not have canine teeth. So I said that human beings are omnivorous. So we can either depend upon plant as a source of food or animal as a source of food. Okay, so cecum, it is a well developed in herbivores but very small in case of man. Arising from the cecum is a finger-like vestigial organ. So what do we call this vestigial organ as? The vermiform appendix. They don't have any role, so they are vestigial. So vestigial is remnants of the evolutionary past. They don't have any roles. Okay, so the vermiform appendix is there. So the cecum is very small, but they are well developed. Cecum is well developed in herbivores, but very small in man. Arising from the cecum is a finger-like vestigial organ, which we call it as vermiform appendix. So the colon consists of ascending colon transverse colon, and descending colon. So that is what the colon is made up of. Rectum, so the pelvic colon, so this pelvic region of the colon, that is the descending colon. So they lead to rectum that opens out by anus. Anus is guarded by anal sphincter. So the anal sphincter is made up of circular and voluntary muscles. So the rectum stores the undigested food material and it is thrown out through the anus. So the anus is guarded by anal sphincter, that is circular voluntary muscle. So this is what we have to remember regarding the large intestine and anus. So in some herbivores, large intestine consists of cellulose digesting bacteria, especially in cecum, they would be having the cellulose digesting bacteria. So those bring about the digestion of cellulose, especially vermiform appendix I was talking about. In herbivores, they are functional and they would be in association with this bacteria which can digest cellulose. They secrete cellulase enzyme which can digest the cellulose. So that symbiotic association is noticed in the large intestine of herbivorous animal. Okay. So now we'll proceed to the next part of it, that is the histology of human gut. Histology, you know that it is a study of tissues and their arrangement. So we call it as histology of human gut. So transverse section of human gut shows four layers. Okay. So you can remember it as MSMS. So you stand to me, you can remember it as me SMS or MSMS. So where M stands for mucosa, S stands for submucosa, M stands for muscularis, and S stands for serosa, not saroja, serosa. So MSMS, mucosa, submucosa, muscularis, and serosa. So the mucosa is the innermost moist epithelial layer. It contains secretory and absorptive cells. See, they contain secretory and absorptive cells. So that is the innermost layer, that is mucosa. So they are moist, innermost layer is moist epithelial layer. They contain secretory and absorptive cells. So the mucosa consists of secretory and absorptive cells. So the submucosa, they are made up of soft connective tissue layer just outside the mucosa. So the submucosa is made up of soft connective tissue layer which is just outside the mucosa. They contain nerve and blood vessels. So the submucosa contains nerve and blood vessels. So remember about that submucosa having the nerve and blood vessels. Okay, so they are the things that we will have to remember about. So they are made up of the soft connective tissue layer. So they are just outside the mucosa. They contain nerve and blood vessels. So the next layer is muscularis. So outer to submucosa, so there is the muscularis. So this is the submucosa layer. They have the nerve and blood vessels. You can see that outer to the submucosa is this muscularis. Okay, muscularis layer is consisting of smooth muscle layer, that is inner circular muscle layer, and outer they have longitudinal muscle layer. So the muscularis, it is outer to submucosa. It consists of smooth muscle layer. So inner circular muscle layer they have, inner circular smooth muscle layer, and outer longitudinal muscle layer. And serosa is the outermost fibrous layer of this human gut. Throughout the alimentary canal, you can find this common features. So serosa is also called as peritoneum. Okay, so they are the outermost fibrous layer. So the serosa is the outermost fibrous layer of the gut. So transverse section of human gut shows four layers. So I told you to remember it as MSMS, me SMS or MSMS. You remember it as M stands for the mucosa layer, submucosa, S stands for submucosa, then muscularis and serosa or peritoneum. So serosa is also called as peritoneum. This is the transverse section of human gut, which shows four layers, that is the mucosa, submucosa, muscularis, and serosa. So mucosa is the innermost layer. They would be secreting mucus also. Moist epithelial layer. They contain secretive and absorptive cells. Submucosa is the layer next to the mucosa. So they are made up of soft connective tissue layer just outside the mucosa, and they contain the nerve and blood vessels. So muscularis is outer to the submucosa. They are made up of smooth muscle layer, and this muscularis is of two types: the inner circular muscles and the outer longitudinal muscles. Serosa is a outermost fibrous layer. They are also called as peritoneum. Okay. So the next slide is digestive system at a glance. So what are the things that you notice? So the we have both the digestive tract as well as the glands that we have been labeled. Okay, so mouth leads into the buccal cavity, and they have the salivary glands. So salivary glands, I asked you to remember it as PSS, not RSS, PSS. A pair of parotid glands, a pair of sublingual glands, a pair of submandibular glands. So PSS, you can remember, a pair of parotid glands. So these are parotid glands. A pair of sublingual, as the name indicates, lingua, tongue. So sublingual glands, it is below the tongue, and submandibular glands. So these are the salivary glands, and they secrete saliva. So the oral cavity leads to pharynx. Pharynx leads to esophagus. So esophagus has this um, gastric esophageal sphincter. Okay, and there is also pyloric sphincter. Okay, so they lead into stomach, and here you have the liver secretes its bile juice, which is stored in gallbladder, and they are conducted, the pancreatic uh, juice, the liver juice is conducted through this bile duct into the duodenum of the small intestine. So the pancreas are small leaf-like structures. They conduct their uh, exocrine secretions through the pancreatic duct, and they open into the duodenum. Okay, so then you can also notice the cecum and appendix. So the helium of small intestine, they connect to the cecum. So cecum has a small vermiform appendix. Okay, so cecum is very small in case of human beings. So and they lead to the ascending portion of large intestine. So then there is a transverse portion of large intestine. So the small intestine, it also has its secretions, which we call it as succus entericus. So small intestine is made up of duodenum, jejunum, and helium. So the helium part, it connects to the cecum. So cecum is very small and underdeveloped in man. So cecum has a vermiform appendix, and this uh, it leads to the ascending colon, transverse colon, descending colon, and then finally it leads to the rectum. Rectum is the where the reservoir of undigested food is present here, and they are thrown out through the anus. So this is the entire digestive system at a glance, and you can see here a simple part of its schematic representation from mouth. Mouth is having this salivary glands. It leads to esophagus. Food is stored in the stomach, so they have the gastric glands, and in the from the stomach they enter into the so small intestine, the duodenum part of it. So the liver secretes the bile juice, which is stored in the gallbladder, and later they are conducted through the bile duct, and pancreas, their secretions open into this duodenum, so through the pancreatic duct. Okay, so the pancreatic juice opens into the duodenum. Small intestine also secretes the intestinal juice or succus entericus. So in the duodenum, maximum enzymes are there, which is from the pancreatic juice as well as from the small intestine. Liver doesn't, the bile juice doesn't have any enzymes, but they have salts like sodium taurocholate, sodium glycocholate, bilirubin, and biliverdin pigments are there. Okay, so the emulsification of fat is brought about by the bile juice. So from the small intestine, so the food enters into the large intestine, and from the large intestine, so they have shown it larger than the small intestine, they enter into the rectum, so where the reservoir of undigested food is stored, and then they are thrown out through the anus. So this is the schematic diagram of the human digestive system. So this is the digestive system at a glance. Okay, so for today's class, we'll stop at this level. Maybe in the tomorrow's class, we'll be discussing about the digestive glands. Do you have any doubts or clarifications, dear students? You can get your doubts clarified at present. Any doubts or clarification, dear students?